Long before the flood swallowed the old world, long before chains were prepared in darkness, long before men whispered the word Nephilim with fear in their throats, the mountain stood in silence. It rose above the valleys like a black altar between earth and heaven, its frozen crown hidden in clouds, its stones scarred by winds that sounded almost like voices. The people below did not call it ordinary. They did not climb it lightly. Shepherds looked away from it when storms gathered. Mothers pulled their children indoors when the summit vanished beneath a ring of dark clouds. The elders said that some places were not meant to be remembered too clearly, because memory itself could become a doorway. Mount Hermon was one of those places. At dawn, it seemed distant and pure, white with snow and silver mist. But when night came, it became something else. The peak looked less like stone and more like a threshold. The stars above it burned strangely bright, and the valleys beneath it grew unnaturally still. Men who lived near its shadow spoke of lights moving where no fire should be, of thunder rolling without rain, of shapes standing upon the heights when no human body could survive the cold. They would wake before sunrise and find their animals silent, their fires lowered to ash, their dreams filled with enormous figures watching from above. Then came the night when the mountains stopped being merely feared. The air changed before anyone saw them. The wind dropped first. Not faded, not softened, but stopped, as if the whole valley had taken one breath and refused to release it. Dogs hid beneath carts. The fires in the tents bent sideways though nothing moved them. Somewhere in the distance, a child began to cry, and every adult nearby turned toward the mountain at once, because they felt the same thing. Something had arrived above them. On the summit, beneath a sky heavy with clouds, 200 watchers gathered in silence. They did not come like men. They stood taller than memory could hold, wrapped in shadow and pale fire, their faces hidden beneath hoods of storm-colored light. Their wings were not spread in beauty, but folded close like judgments withheld. Around them the snow did not melt, yet black marks opened in the stone beneath their feet, as if the mountain itself was being forced to remember every step. They looked down upon the human world, upon the smoke of small villages, the dim fires of families, the fields, the rivers, the sleeping children, the women drawing water at dawn, the men guarding their animals with sharpened wood and trembling hands. They had watched humanity for generations. They had seen hunger, birth, grief, laughter, blood, marriage, burial. They had seen how fragile mankind was, how brief, how easily broken. And somewhere in that watching, desire had grown into rebellion. One among them spoke, though no human ear heard the words. The others knew what he meant before the sound was formed. To descend was forbidden. To take what had not been given was forbidden. To teach what heaven had hidden was forbidden. No one could pretend ignorance. No one could say they had stumbled. They stood on the mountain with full knowledge, and that knowledge made the silence more terrible. So they made a pact. Not a promise of loyalty to heaven, but a vow against it. They bound themselves together so none could turn back alone, none could be judged alone, none could flee the weight of what they were about to do. On the highest stones of Hermon, with clouds moving like a living ceiling above them, the 200 swore that they would descend together, sin together, and bear the curse together. The mountain received the oath. The old stories say the place was named for that binding, as if the sound of the vow sank into the rock. From that night onward, Hermon was no longer just a mountain. It was the place where heaven was betrayed from below the stars. It was the place where watchers stopped watching and crossed the line they had been commanded never to cross. Below, the people felt it before they understood it. Some woke choking, as if smoke had entered their homes. Some ran outside and saw the clouds turning around the peak in a slow circle. Others saw figures descending through the darkness, not falling like stones, not flying like birds, but moving with a terrible calm, step by step through the air, as if an invisible staircase had been laid between the summit and the valley. No one knew whether to kneel, run, pray, or hide. The oldest men, who had survived famine and war, could not speak. They had no word for beings that were beautiful and dreadful at the same time. When the watchers came among men, the world did not end immediately. That was the horror of it. The sky did not split open. The rivers did not boil. Morning still came. Bread was still baked. Children still laughed in the dust. But something had entered the human story that did not belong there, and from that moment, nothing grew straight. They came first as teachers. They showed men secrets hidden from the beginning. They taught the shaping of metal, the making of blades, the drawing of power from stone and flame. They taught women the arts of adornment, colors for the eyes, signs for the body, ways to stir desire and command attention. They taught roots and signs, measures of stars, the reading of omens, the cutting of weapons, the calling of things that should have remained unnamed. Knowledge spread like fire through dry grass, and men mistook speed for blessing. At first, the villages marveled. Tools became sharper. Walls rose faster. Fire burned hotter. The night seemed less frightening when men could hold iron in their hands. But the elders noticed what others ignored. The songs changed. The faces changed. Children stared too long into flames. Men no longer feared blood the way they once had. The sky felt farther away. The earth felt heavier. Then the children of the Watchers were born. No cradle was made for them. No mother could look upon them without love and terror becoming one wound inside her. They grew too quickly. Their shadows crossed doorways before their names were fully spoken. Their hands were the size of shields. Their hunger was not like human hunger. When they cried, animals broke their ropes. When they stood, men stepped back. When they laughed, the valley seemed smaller. These were the Nephilim. To those who saw them as infants, they were wonders. To those who saw them grown, they were warnings. They walked across fields as if the earth had been made for their feet alone. They lifted stones that teams of men could not move. They bent trees, broke gates, drank deeply, ate endlessly, demanded more. Their fathers had come from the heights, their mothers from the dust, and in them the forbidden union became flesh. The people tried to live around them. They offered food, tribute, cattle, grain. They praised them as heroes because fear often wears the mask of worship. Stories spread from valley to valley of mighty ones, men of renown, beings who could defeat armies, crush enemies, build towers, and stand against beasts. But behind every tale of glory was a quieter story no one wanted to tell. Empty barns, broken families, children taken, fields trampled, blood in places where no battle had been declared. The Nephilim did not merely grow in size. They grew in appetite. And their appetite taught mankind new forms of violence. Men who had once killed to survive began killing to possess. Kings rose with cruelty in their eyes, claiming the strength of giants as their right. Smiths forged weapons not for defense, but for domination. Women wept behind woven doors. Shepherds found their flocks torn apart and knew not whether beast, giant, or man had done it. The earth, which had received Abel's blood long before, now drank blood daily until the ground itself seemed tired of bearing witness. Above it all, Hermon remained. The mountain looked down on what had begun there. Storms gathered over its summit even when the valleys were clear. Travelers passing near it spoke in low voices. Some claimed they could still see shapes on the ridge at twilight, hooded and unmoving. Others said the stones near the top were marked with lines that looked like writing but were not made by human hands. There were places where fire had blackened the rock, though no tree had ever grown there. There were hollows in the snow where no footstep led in and none led out. The Watchers had brought forbidden light, but it did not illuminate the world. It exposed what could rot inside it. The more mankind learned, the less mankind bowed. The more power entered human hands, the more the heart hardened. Children were born into a world already leaning toward ruin. They heard stories of heaven but saw giants. They heard of righteousness but watched the strong devour the weak. They learned that fear could build cities, that violence could create names, that beauty could be used like a blade, that knowledge without obedience becomes a curse wearing the face of wisdom. There must have been people who remembered the world before. Old women sitting near dying fires, staring at grandchildren who would never believe how quiet the nights once were. Old men with clouded eyes, pointing toward Hermon and telling anyone who would listen that the first mistake had not been made in the valley, but above it, on the mountain, in the cold, in the oath. But the young laughed, because every cursed age believes it is stronger than the warnings of the old. Then came the grief of heaven. Not sudden anger, not a storm thrown without thought, but grief. The kind that watches corruption spread from house to house, from ruler to servant, from father to son, until violence becomes the language of the earth. The kind that sees giants roaming where children should play. The kind that hears the cry of blood rising from the ground without rest. The Watchers had chosen their descent. The Nephilim had filled the earth with dread. Humanity had taken the secrets and sharpened them into rebellion. And the world, once given as a place of life, had become a place preparing for judgment. Still the mountain stood. Before the rains came, there must have been one last season when the sky felt wrong. Birds changing direction. Animals restless without reason. Clouds forming too low. The air heavy, as if the heavens were drawing near not in mercy, but in decision. Men looked up and felt something ancient closing around them. The giants, who had never feared the ground beneath them, may have looked toward the horizon and sensed that size would not save them. The Watchers, wherever they wandered, knew the oath had reached its end. The flood did not begin as a story. It began as a sound. Rain on dust. Rain on roofs. Rain on stone. Rain on the slopes of Hermon, washing over the place where 200 had sworn together. Valleys filled. Rivers rose. Fields disappeared. Fires died. Men climbed hills with their families and looked back at homes sinking beneath brown water. Giants moved through the storm, enormous and helpless beneath a judgment they could not strike, could not command, could not devour. The world that had celebrated forbidden strength now watched strength drown. Water climbed the places men trusted. Then the places giants trusted. Then the places no one believed water could reach. And Hermon remained above the ruin like a witness that refused to sink. When the waters passed, the old world was gone. Its cities, its violence, its cries, its mighty names, its giants, all taken beneath the silence. The Watchers were bound, not with ropes made by men, but with chains prepared for beings who had known heaven and betrayed it. Their secret knowledge became memory, then warning, then fragment, then myth. Men would argue later over what had truly happened, whether giants had lived, whether angels had descended, whether a mountain could hold the echo of a sin. But those who had lived near Hermon would not have argued. They had seen the summit darken. They had felt the wind stop. They had watched lights move where no human fire burned. They had heard the valley fall silent beneath descending shadows. They had seen children born too large for the world. They had buried the small beneath the footprints of the great. They had learned that some stories survive not because men want to remember them, but because the earth itself refuses to forget. That is why the mountain still feels different in the imagination. Not merely high, not merely ancient, but accused. It stands like a sealed door between what mankind knows and what mankind was never meant to know. Its stones seem to ask whether forbidden knowledge ever truly disappears, or whether it only waits beneath new names. Its clouds seem to gather around the same invisible wound. Its silence is not empty. It is the silence after an oath. The silence after judgment. The silence of a place that heard angels decide to fall and has never stopped holding the sound.